There is a sacred ordeal the soul endures that no one sees. It unfolds in silence, far from the reach of any therapist, untouched by the wisdom of books, and often misunderstood even by those who love you most. You may have believed you were merely navigating a difficult season, unaware that your soul was being tested at the deepest level, an invisible threshold that marks a transformation far greater than survival. In the quiet background of life, beyond the visible wounds and without public recognition, you were undergoing what I've come to see as the soul's most profound initiation. Over the course of my life's work, I have witnessed this hidden passage reshape individuals in irreversible ways. It is the slow alchemy of the psyche, a sacred fire that burns without flame, yet alters your entire internal architecture. For some, this transformation arrives through what I call the doorway of sacred suffering, a depth of pain that leaves no external trace, but forever changes the soul's orientation to life. And the signs of this change? They are not loud. They will not be praised by the world. They appear in the subtle shifts of your presence, in the energy that surrounds you, in the way you carry silence differently now. Perhaps, without even knowing it, you have already passed this soul's test. Perhaps the evidence lives in your eyes, in the way others pause around you, sensing something they cannot explain. These 7 signs we are about to explore are not medals earned, but quiet signals that your inner world has survived something few can name. I have come to believe that some souls experience a second psychological birth during this lifetime, not marked by celebration, but by stillness. It arrives in the pauses between heartbreak and healing, in the aftermath of letting go, in the quiet realization that the version of yourself you were chasing has already awakened within. The real question is not whether you've earned transformation, but whether you can recognize its presence within you. Like a tree that has endured the strike of lightning yet still stands, your psyche has developed a resilience that bends without breaking. You are learning the rare art of turning hardship into wisdom, of making peace from pain, and of embodying a strength that no longer resists life, but moves with it. The first unmistakable sign that your soul has passed through its most painful test is revealed in your evolving relationship with solitude. In earlier stages of life, being alone may have felt like a punishment, a void to be filled, an exile from love or belonging. But now, something within you has softened, deepened, and reversed the narrative. What once felt like abandonment now opens as a sanctuary. In my lifelong exploration of the abandonment complex, I have seen how this early wound propels us outward, scattering our psychic energy in endless pursuits of approval, affection, and external affirmation. It is a hunger for connection born from the ache of not having been seen, held, or validated in our formative years. But when this wound begins to heal, when it no longer rules your inner compass, a quiet but radical shift takes place. Your energy, once diffused and externalized, begins to return to you. You are no longer driven by the unconscious need to be chosen or praised. Instead, you rest in your own presence as enough. This is not a retreat from life. It is not the stillness of avoidance or despair. It is a sacred stillness born from self-possession. You stop needing to explain your worth. You stop performing. The silence you once feared becomes the very atmosphere in which your truest self begins to emerge. Without the constant noise of external influence, your inner voice grows louder, more precise, more honest. You begin to notice that your greatest clarity arrives not from others' validation, but from the deeper knowing that rises when you are undistracted and undisturbed. This kind of solitude is not isolation. It is intimacy with the self. and it marks the emergence of what I call the individuated psyche. You begin to observe with quiet compassion how many around you still escape themselves through endless movement, stimulation, or superficial connection. You no longer judge this. You simply recognize it as one who once lived that same cycle but no longer needs to. A deeper paradox soon reveals itself. The more comfortable you become in your own energy, the more magnetic you become to others who are starved for authenticity. Your nervous system, once reactive and strained, now settles into coherence. What once triggered panic now invites wonder. You no longer fear the unknown. You are drawn to it. You welcome liminal space, the threshold between who you were and who you are becoming. This is where true transformation lives, and you have learned to stand there, alone but not lonely, whole and undivided. The second unmistakable sign that you have emerged from your soul's deepest trial is found in your evolving relationship with your own shadow. In earlier chapters of your life, you may have feared the darkness within, those impulses, patterns, and emotions you were taught to suppress or deny. But now, instead of turning away, you face them with eyes unflinching. Throughout my life's work, I have explored shadow integration not as a theory, but as a living psychological necessity. It is the sacred process by which you cease trying to amputate the parts of yourself you find unacceptable and instead begin to understand them, listen to them, and fold them into your wholeness. This transformation cannot be faked. It is born only after you have suffered enough to stop pretending. You begin to see yourself with searing honesty. You acknowledge your capacity to manipulate, your desire for power, and your instinct to hurt when you feel cornered. But rather than condemning yourself for these truths, you begin to recognize them as vital energies, raw, psychic material that must be harnessed rather than denied. Your anger, once a raging force you feared or a silent poison you swallowed, now becomes something else entirely. It becomes sacred fire, not fire that burns to destroy your life, but fire that burns through illusion, codependency, and self-betrayal. It clears out the relationships that no longer nourish your soul. It severs the silent agreements you once made when you believed you were not enough. This fire is not chaotic. It is intentional. It serves your becoming. There is a new density in your presence that others can feel. Even when you speak softly, there is a quiet power underneath, because you have reconciled with your own contradictions. You no longer chase purity. You are not trying to be good in the eyes of others. Instead, you are becoming whole in your own eyes. You have stopped demanding that your inner paradoxes resolve themselves and have learned instead to hold them like sacred tension, what I have long described as the very ground of inner transformation. This is not about control, but about containment. The way you experience emotional intensity has shifted. Where once you were thrown into chaos by a wave of feeling, now you remain anchored. You have built a psychic container strong enough to hold grief, rage, joy, and fear without collapsing. You do not repress your emotions. You meet them, you work with them, you give them form. And in doing so, you become a conscious vessel for energies that used to possess you. This is shadow work in its true form, not rejection, but transmutation, not perfection, but integration. And this is the mark of one who has passed through the fire and emerged not spotless, but whole. The third sign reveals itself as a quiet immunity to the projections of others. In earlier stages of life, you may have unconsciously absorbed the emotional burdens of those around you, mistaking their unprocessed material as your responsibility to fix. But now, you begin to see with clarity. Projection is one of the most subtle yet pervasive dynamics of the unconscious mind. It is how individuals, unable to face their own shadows, cast them outward onto those closest to them. Yet something within you has shifted. You no longer internalize what was never yours. You begin to recognize the moment when someone projects blame, shame, or unresolved pain onto you, not with defensiveness, but with calm observation. It is not personal, it is data, it is the soul in struggle, reaching outward for relief. This awareness does not make you arrogant. On the contrary, it deepens your compassion. But your compassion is no longer the self-abandoning kind that throws itself into someone else's fire. It has matured into something sacred and stable. You offer presence, but not sacrifice. You offer care, but not at the cost of your own center. You begin to witness the dramas that once pulled you in like whirlpools, from manipulations to triangulations to guilt-laced pleas for rescue, and instead of being swept away, you stand firm at the shoreline. You see it all not with judgment, but with the detachment of a soul that has learned to hold space without losing itself. This is the emergence of what I once called the transcendent function, the ability to rise above oppositional entanglements and perceive a wider field of consciousness. When others bring you their storms, you no longer collapse into their chaos. You no longer feel the visceral pull to make their pain your mission. Instead, you hold a stillness within. You discern the difference between offering a lifeline and becoming the raft they refuse to build for themselves. This evolution may not always be well received. Your quiet refusal to carry what is not yours might be seen by others as coldness or distance. But you know better. This boundary is not the result of disconnection, but of deep connection to your inner self, your limits, and the sacredness of your own emotional energy. You are no longer trying to save people from their path. You are trusting them to walk it. And in doing so, you reclaim the power you once scattered in the name of false responsibility. This is not detachment. This is love with a backbone. It is the wisdom that says, I will walk beside you, but I will not carry you. The fifth sign reveals itself in your changing relationship with time and perception. Where once time felt like a predator chasing you into exhaustion, now it feels like a sacred space in which life reveals itself. You no longer relate to time as something to conquer, outrun, or manipulate. You begin to inhabit it as a living rhythm rather than a fixed deadline. This shift is not merely practical, it is existential. The deeper your healing, the more you sense that time obeys an inner tempo, not external pressure. You are no longer driven by artificial urgency, but by alignment with something more enduring and true. As this inner transformation deepens, something astonishing begins to unfold. Your intuition awakens, not as a vague feeling, but as a fully developed function of knowing. Where once logic, planning, and external validation guided your choices, now you consult a quieter voice within. You begin to hear what was always speaking to you beneath the surface, the subtle stirrings of the self, the archetype of wholeness that emerges when the ego begins to soften. This is not the rejection of rational thought, but the expansion of consciousness beyond it. You start to feel the difference between the noise of the wounded ego and the clarity of intuitive truth. One screams for control, the other whispers with wisdom. Synchronicities begin to flow into your life with a frequency that no longer surprises you. Instead of coincidence, you begin to recognize coordination, meaningful patterns orchestrated by a deeper intelligence you now trust. A message overheard in passing, a person met at the exact right moment, a dream that mirrors waking life. These are not accidents, they are signals, symbols, invitations to follow the thread of your own unfolding. Your perception sharpens not through suspicion, but through attunement. You begin to sense the emotional undercurrents in a conversation, the stories people hide behind their smiles, the energy that speaks louder than words. You listen not just to what is said, but to the pauses, the hesitations, the tremors in someone's tone. You perceive the unseen, not through analysis, but through a deepening presence that no longer needs to fix, only to witness. In this stage, you stop needing long deliberations or external consensus. Decisions arrive not through debate, but through resonance. You consult your inner counsel, something ancient, wise, and rooted in the collective memory of those who came before you. You feel, perhaps for the first time, what it means to trust your life, not as a concept, but as a reality. You no longer chase certainty. You follow alignment. This is not the abandonment of reason. It is the evolution of consciousness, a return to the inner compass that was waiting for your silence. The sixth sign unfolds when you begin to trust the natural rhythm of inner transformation. You no longer panic when life appears to unravel or when meaning feels like it vanishes overnight. Instead of seeing these periods as collapses, you begin to recognize them as sacred pauses, initiations into a deeper layer of your becoming. You have fully integrated the archetype of death and rebirth, not as a metaphor, but as a living psychological truth. You understand now that every cycle of decay is an invitation for regeneration. The endings you once feared now signal the beginning of something more rooted, more aligned, more whole. This profound shift does not make uncertainty easier, but it does make it sacred. Where once you clung to guarantees, to plans, to clear results, you now begin to live in the space between the question and the answer. This space, once intolerable, becomes fertile. You act not from the pressure to fix or finalize, but from a deeper resonance with what feels true right now. It is not recklessness, it is alignment. And from this quiet alignment, a hidden order begins to move through you. An energetic intelligence awakens inside you. You no longer hemorrhage energy trying to maintain appearances or fulfill outdated roles. Instead of scattering your attention across countless obligations that leave you empty, you learn the quiet power of restraint. You choose fewer things, but with your whole self. Like a wise gardener, you begin to recognize where your life force is most needed, where it will take root, and where it must be pruned. You stop planting in barren soil. You stop watering what was never yours to grow. And with this wisdom, your creativity transforms. No longer a performance or an attempt to prove your worth, your creative expression becomes sacred. It is not about being seen. It is about being connected to the pulse of life, to the stream of intuition, to the archetypal symbols rising from within. What you make is not just a product, it is a reflection of your own evolution. You create as a way of listening. You write, build, speak, paint, or nurture, not to be impressive, but to be in communion with the force that is reshaping you from the inside out. You come to understand that growth is not linear, it spirals. It returns you to old lessons, but with new eyes. It humbles you, it matures you, and through it all, you develop an abiding patience with yourself. You stop measuring your worth by speed. You begin to honor the slow miracle of your own becoming. The seventh and final sign reveals itself in your evolving relationship with external approval. Where you once calibrated your worth based on how others saw you, now a quiet shift has occurred, one so fundamental that the old impulse to prove, impress, or outperform no longer governs your choices. The craving to be seen, to be chosen, to be applauded begins to dissolve, not because you no longer care, but because something deeper has awakened within you. You begin to sense what Alfred Adler and I described as the root of the inferiority complex, a deep-seated wound that convinces you to seek your value through comparison and achievement. And slowly, that wound begins to close. Its once loud voice fades into a whisper and eventually into silence. What rises in its place is what I call inner authority. No longer do you chase consensus to validate your experience. You become rooted in your own knowing. There is a quiet confidence that grows from this place, not loud or performative, but steady, like a mountain that does not move when the wind changes direction. Praise no longer intoxicates you. Criticism no longer paralyzes you. Both are received, but neither dictates your self-perception. They are data, not destiny. They are reflections, not commands. This psychological freedom marks a profound milestone on the path of individuation. And from this clarity, a reservoir of energy is released, energy that was once spent managing your image, editing your truth, or rehearsing performances for acceptance. You stop negotiating with your soul just to fit in. Your authenticity becomes non-negotiable. You begin to choose truth even when it costs you approval. You let go of roles that require self-betrayal to maintain. You allow rejection if it means remaining whole. This courage is not born of defiance, but of alignment. You are no longer afraid of being misunderstood because you are finally understood by yourself. Even your body begins to mirror this transformation. The way you stand, speak, and inhabit space reflects a grounded sense of self-possession. You are no longer chasing belonging. You carry it with you. You walk not to impress, but to express. You move through life as someone who belongs first to themselves, whose presence no longer asks for permission to exist. This embodiment of inner authority is not arrogance, it is sovereignty. It is the quiet dignity of one who has walked through the fire and come out intact, not because the world approved, but because the soul finally did. The final sign arises in the way you now discern where and how your energy is spent. In a world that demands constant availability, you begin to see how costly indiscriminate presence can be. You no longer scatter your life force across situations that only leave you hollow. This shift is not about superiority, but about reverence for your own soul, for the sacredness of your time, and for the quiet flame that burns within you. This is the emergence of what I would call energetic sovereignty. It is not the armor of control, but the inner alignment that chooses with intention, where once you gave without pause, now you pause before giving. Where once you rushed to prove, now you protect what makes you whole. There is a clarity that begins to form, subtle but undeniable. You feel it in your body when something pulls at your peace. You sense it in the tension that arises around certain people or obligations. Instead of overriding these signals for the sake of politeness or obligation, you start to listen. You begin to understand that your energy is not infinite and that its conservation is not selfish. It is sacred stewardship. You become less interested in explaining your boundaries and more interested in embodying them. People may notice your growing silence, your fewer appearances, your slower replies, but these are not symptoms of withdrawal. They are signs of return to self, return to essence. The guilt that once haunted you when saying no begins to fade. It is replaced by a quiet inner permission to guard what is precious. You no longer trade your peace for belonging or your clarity for comfort. You recognize the cost of staying in spaces that drain you, and you honor the quiet wisdom that tells you when to walk away. You develop a refined sensitivity, an inner compass that points you toward what nourishes, not what merely entertains or distracts. You are no longer willing to be everything to everyone. Instead, you offer your presence where it can be a true offering, not a sacrifice. This shift marks a profound stage in individuation. You do not retreat into bitterness. You withdraw into clarity. The world may not understand the depth of this transformation, but your soul does. And from this inner alignment, a new kind of power radiates, not one that controls others, but one that gently reclaims yourself. This is maturity. This is peace. This is the life of someone who has passed the most painful test and emerged whole. Your relationship with suffering itself undergoes a fundamental transformation where once pain was something to be avoided, it becomes a teacher whose lessons you receive with gratitude. This does not mean you seek suffering, but that you extract wisdom from unavoidable challenges. A stillness follows you now, not an absence of movement, but a presence of deep centeredness. This stillness attracts those who are searching for something they cannot name. You become a living example of the individuated soul. Your relationship with hope matures from wishful thinking into an active faith in the life process itself. You no longer hope for specific outcomes, but develop trust in your own capacity to meet whatever emerges. This second psychological birthmark marks not just recovery, but a fundamental reorganization of consciousness. You become psychologically independent of your early programming. There is a sense of completion that has nothing to do with external achievements and everything to do with an internal reconciliation. You no longer need to recover from your past because you have learned to create from your present moment. The person you thought you should become is revealed as a limitation compared to the unique being you already are. Your journey continues, but a crucial phase is completed. You have passed through the soul's most demanding examination, emerging not unscathed, but integrated, not unchanged, but more essentially yourself. The test revealed your true nature. The secret I spent my lifetime learning becomes your lived reality. The soul does not grow despite suffering, but through a conscious and transformative relationship with it. Your pain becomes your teacher. Your wounds become your wisdom. You carry the quiet dignity of someone who has met themselves completely and found not perfection, but wholeness. If you recognize yourself in these signs, know that you have passed through an initiation that most will never understand. Your transformation serves not only your own evolution, but also creates a template of possibility for others. And your journey of conscious evolution has only just begun. If this touched something sacred inside you, don't let it fade into silence. Like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Your presence here is not just support, it's resonance. And if you feel moved to give back, your donation becomes a quiet but powerful gesture that helps keep this light alive for others still walking in the dark.